Hello, and welcome to episode 2 of The Smallest Thing. As I record this episode, we are going into our 3rd week of lockdown. Over the past 2 weeks, I have eaten through our stash of comfort food. I have video called my poor mother so many times I think she's sick of me. I've had a couple of meltdowns and taken a lot of long walks to blow off steam. And one day, while running an essential errand to pick up the remains of my recently deceased feline friend, I drove the long way just so I could go beyond the city limits and see the horizon. By the time this episode airs, I will also have spent a big milestone birthday not strolling the streets of Paris as planned, but in the house. But I am safe and healthy and staying relatively sane. And we just received a news alert that California's aggressive social distancing requirements appear to have flattened the curve and stemmed the spread of COVID-19. So that makes all this worthwhile. How are you holding up? I hope you're okay. In last week's episode, we met Em, a girl on a mission to get out of her dull English village, and we learned that something is not right in Em's world. In this chapter, we meet Em's best friend, Deb, and find out what's going on in the village. Stick around after. I'll be taking you on a scenic tour of the Peak District and the present-day village of Eyam. For now, though, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of The Smallest Thing. Welcome to the serialized audiobook, The Smallest Thing, written by Lisa Manterfield, read for you by Charlie Sanderson.
Chapter 2. Monday, July the 18th. I stare at Dad's text, but it takes ages for the words to make sense. I see them. Passed away in the early hours. I can't get a grasp on what they really mean. I know people die every day, several every second even, but my mind can't seem to reconcile the sudden end of my neighbour. How he could be laughing and talking with me a few days ago and then suddenly be gone. Like someone hit the off button on his remote control and threw away the batteries. It doesn't add up. He was young. Younger than my parents by a long way, and healthy. He was a doctor, for goodness sake. I forced my mind to picture him dead, lying in hospital, the life gone out of him. But each time he sits up and grins, as if he's just pulled the best prank ever. What scares me most of all is, if this could happen to Dr. Spencer, it could happen to anyone. We're all just a flick of a switch from oblivion. Every single one of us. I feel as if someone has performed one of those tricks where they yank away a tablecloth, leaving the plates and cups in place. From a distance, it looks as if the cloth has been moved, but everything on the table has felt the silent friction of its departure. I brush my hands across my face to rub away these shaky thoughts. I need something solid and logical to grasp onto, something that makes some sort of sense. I text Deb. You hear about Dr. Spencer? I wait an unacceptable length of time before Deb responds. I love my best friend, but she is stuck in the dark ages when it comes to electronic communication. No, she replies at last. What? I fill her in on what I know about Dr. Spencer's illness and unexpected demise. Flu, I write. How'd you die of flu? A second later, Deb FaceTimes me. Even at this early hour, she is dressed in black. Black isn't a statement for Deb, it's a matter of practicality. My brain has more important things to think about than what to wear, she likes to say. Are you sure it was the flu? Deb asks. That's what I heard, but people don't usually die of the flu, do they? Not from the common strains, no. Deb says, switching to her talking encyclopedia voice. Maybe the very old and the very young, people with compromised immune systems. Doesn't sound like him. But then there was the Spanish flu, completely different animal, I won't bore you with the details, but basically it killed off the young and strong. Oh, great, I say, trying to ignore the creeping fingers of worry that ripple across my stomach. That's us. Well, it's you. That particular strain had a thing for strong immune systems, so for once, I'd be among the least likely to get it. Deb is notorious for getting every cold and bug that comes around, and coupled with her asthma, they wreak havoc. I blame it on the fact that she spends way too much time in her room, hunched over her books. On the other hand, that's the reason she'll be heading off to Oxford after the summer, and why someday my best friend will insist I call her Dr. Elliot. Do you think that's what he had? I ask, not sure I want to hear the answer. A chill sense of dread flares up inside me. What if it's not the flu? What if it's something worse, like Zika or Ebola or some new thing, and we're the first to get it? The look Deb gives me will come in handy for telling her patients in a kind, comforting, but no-nonsense way not to get their knickers in a twist over nothing. It's too cold for those kinds of mosquitoes here, and I can't think of a single person in the village who's been anywhere near Africa lately. Can you? I shake my head. Most likely he had something else going on that hadn't been diagnosed. Are you telling me I shouldn't worry? I am, but keep your hands washed, don't touch your face, and don't go around kissing too many people, just in case. My face flushes as thoughts of Roe and last night come rushing in. It's a bit late for that, I say. Oh, Salty. Deb sighs, my nickname rolling off her tongue. No need to ask who the lucky recipient was, I suppose. Deb, Pepper, because some bright spark thought my blonde and her dark hair made us look like salt and pepper pots, listens as I relay my adventures from the night before. I tell her about my daring descent from the window, about noticing the light on at Dr. Spencer's but not knowing then what it meant. I tell her about the ambulance and the terrible look on Dr. Spencer's face, and about Dad all but ignoring the fact that I was there. And I tell her about my decision to go to London with or without my parents' consent. You never want to do anything the easy way, do you? She says with an admiring smile. If you're adamant about going, why not wait another month until you can get a job that could actually support you? I love my friend, but sometimes we are more like chalk and cheese than salt and pepper. Even though it was our differences that brought us together in the first place, it's still hard to explain to someone on a trajectory to a brilliant career in medicine that I'd rather take my chances and risk living on the edge of poverty than bury my dreams for the sake of security. I'm tired of waiting for something to happen. I can't stand to be stuck here for one more month. You don't have to explain that to me, she says. During the first 9 years of her life, Deb lived in Canada and Brazil and Malaysia and Saudi Arabia. When her dad finally got sick of trailing his family around after his wife's career, he moved Deb and her brother here to, and I quote, a nice quiet place to raise the kids. A newcomer to our school was a rare novelty, and Deb's exotic background made her a flashing red target for the mean kids. But to me, she was like a precious jewel in a heap of dull grey pebbles, and I immediately felt protective of her. Her defence cost me a torn uniform and a trip to the headmistress, but our friendship was cemented. And even though we're now on different paths, we share a common goal, to live our lives anywhere but here. But why the rush? She says. You've got your whole life ahead of you. Dr. Spencer probably thought the same thing. Deb nods that she knows I'm right. And what does Roe think about all this? I answer with a coy smile. Deb sighs and twists her mouth across to one side of her face, a sure sign she's contemplating something profound. If anybody can pull off an insane plan like this, it's you, she says. But not everyone has the stomach for risk. Go with Roe if you must, but make sure you can support yourself if you have to. That's all I'm saying. I could protest her suggestion that Roe might get cold feet, but I know she has my best interests at heart. She isn't saying I shouldn't trust Roe, only that I should hang my own safety net first. A niggling feeling I don't want to voice tells me my friend has good advice. Building a safety net means keeping my summer job for 2 more weeks, which means keeping my boss happy. Unfortunately, my boss is also my dad, and with Mum off at Auntie Margie's with my little sister for another 10 days, I'm Dad's right-hand woman. In an attempt to get, and stay, on his good side, I button my army green work shirt up to the neck before slipping into the brown sleeveless jacket that makes me look as if I'm heading out on safari instead of guiding old ladies around the historical highlights of Eyam. Everything about my uniform screams boring and safe. Just as Dad likes it. I took my purple hair streak out of sight, pinning it with a girly clip, and trade my trusty pink special edition Doc Martens, the ones that make me feel like I can kick any of life's obstacles aside, for sensible brown walking shoes. I look like a drab, middle-aged version of myself. I look like my dad. Dad still isn't home by the time I'm ready, so I use the spare hour or so before work to dash off an email accepting the job, put in an application for the room, and fill Rowan on the events of the previous night and my close call with Dad. I don't press him about London. I'll wait until he brings it up. But with Deb's warning to remain independent pinging around in my brain, I search around a website, appropriately named A Bit on the Side, listing hundreds of gigs in the city. I add lunch delivery person, bicycle courier, and even human billboard to my list of possible ways to make some extra cash. On the next page, I spot a listing for part-time tour guides. Over my dead body, I think, and turn my attention instead to packing. I'm almost ready to leave the house when Dad phones. You'll have to manage on your own today. I need to stay with Louise until her folks can get here. This is my dad in a nutshell. He always has to have his nose in everybody else's business. This is exactly the sort of thing I want to get away from. But as he seems to have forgotten about me being out last night, I opt not to poke the tiger. Dad, I say, gathering my resolve to break my own news about leaving. I've got something I need to talk to you about. Do you feel ill? He asks. What? His question shocks me into temporary silence. Does he know something he's not telling me? No? Why? Then if it's not urgent, it will have to wait until tonight. With that, he goes back to his business, leaving me feeling as if I've walked into a freshly washed window and wondering why I didn't see it. At the village green, the same cluster of neighbours is regrouped to tittle-tattle about Dr. Spencer's untimely departure. I consider slipping in to see if I can glean more information about this flu thing, but a familiar rumble stops me. Seconds later, a red minibus with Old Fieldview Residential Facility emblazoned on the side trundles around the hairpin bend by the stone "Welcome to Eyam" sign and disgorges a haphazard clump of elderly ladies. I force a welcoming smile, and the ladies fall in line like waddling ducklings, their collapsible metal walking sticks clicking in a syncopated beat beneath a twitter of excitable chatter. It's a slow procession to the churchyard, the ladies stopping every 10 steps to fumble with cameras and snap photos. I wish they'd hurry up so I can get this over with. Although now that the rain has stopped, leaving a pristine blue sky in its wake, even I have to admit that the village is postcard perfect. The flowers have pushed through in tubs, and hanging baskets surround the doors of our neighbours' cottages, adding a sunny charm that the tourists flock to enjoy. Every square of front garden is ready to burst with blooms. Hollyhocks, roses, fuchsia and sunflowers, rambling scarlet runners, and brilliant displays of petunias and chrysanthemums. It's all too jolly and sunny, and in complete contrast to the grey cloud of unease that hangs over me. The tour gets off to a rocky start. I know the spiel by heart, but I can't focus on the story I'm supposed to tell. My thoughts flit from the dead Siddles to Dr. Spencer, to my troubling conversation with Deb, until finally landing on my exodus to London and the big talk I still have to have with Dad. The old ladies don't seem to notice my stammering. They cluck and ooh with every tidbit of story, and a small round woman gushes. Aren't you lucky living in a lovely place like this? No wonder your family's never wanted to leave. I hold my smile in place for her benefit, but inside I'm thinking, lady, you are wronger than wrong. As the troupe waddles off to the tea rooms for refreshments, I have a vision of myself years from now, no longer 17, but middle-aged like my dad. I'm standing right here, proudly spouting about the dullness of my family tree. The enormity of that fate hits me, my alternate future staring me in the face. In keeping my dreams of moving to London to myself, my parents have assumed I will stay. If I don't pluck up the courage to tell Dad about my plans, I may as well join the dead Siddles and rot away for all eternity in the only place I've ever called home. My thoughts lurch to a halt when a bright yellow ambulance swings around the village green and pulls up outside the Cooper's house, next door to the Spencers. A new uneasiness grows as, minutes later, the paramedics emerge carrying Karen Cooper, who moved here with her husband a few months ago. She is sitting up and talking, but her face has the same yellowish pallor as Dr. Spencer's. Deb assured me I shouldn't worry just yet, but 3 deaths in the space of 2 weeks isn't exactly normal. If Karen has the same thing, it means it's catching, and there is no way I'm waiting around to find out if it's coming for me. As the ambulance pulls away, I race home, taking the stairs to my room 2 at a time. I hammer out a resignation letter to Dad, leaving it on the kitchen table for whenever he gets home. Then I type up everything I must do to get to London. I save the file as the beginning of the rest of my life.
Welcome back. Last week I talked a bit about the history of Eyam and how it earned the name the Plague Village. This week, as none of us are able to travel to Eyam in person, I thought I'd take you on a virtual tour of the present-day village. We'll hop in my mum's little blue car. She won't mind. She's been on lockdown too, and she's worried it won't start if it sits idle for too long. The run-out will do it good, she says. We're going to drive through the Hope Valley and follow the River Derwent. You can just see it through the trees over there. We'll pass through the town of Hathersage, where Robin Hood's sidekick, Little John, is buried. The pub on the corner is named after him, and we can maybe stop for an excellent lunch on the way back. If we keep going straight down this road, we'll get to Chatsworth House, a grand, stately home, where Pride and Prejudice and The Duchess were filmed, and home of the Duke and Duchess of Devonshire. Instead, when we get to Grindleford, which comes up later in the story, we're going to turn off up this narrow country lane. Watch your speed because it's barely wide enough for 2 cars. There's a lovely view from up here. You can look across the moors, crisscrossed with dry stone walls. There's a few sheep in the field over there. We'll make a quick stop here before we go down into the Eyam. I want to show you Montpesson's well. This shallow stone well lies a short distance from the village, and during the plague, the people of Eyam used it as a place to exchange money for provisions. Vinegar was added to the well water, and the villagers left money in the disinfected water. People from outside the village would bring in food and provisions and leave them at the well, taking the clean money in exchange. Even back then, they understood the importance of hygiene to curb the spread of disease. So, we're going to drop down the little lane here and park by the museum and walk down into Eyam itself. Eyam's a little picturesque village here in Derbyshire, in the Peak District. It's one of my favourite places to visit. It's a really pretty village with all the typical amenities. You'll find a tourist information office, a couple of good tea rooms serving homemade cakes, and of course, a pub. There's a narrow road that goes through the village. Today, it's packed with parked cars, parked all the way along the edges. But most of the buildings in the village are still old stone cottages that date back, many of them, all the way back to the time of the plague in the 1600s. We're going to stop at some of those cottages shortly. First, we'll pass the little village shop, the Eyam Country Store. that sells fruits and veg and homemade preserves and, of course, ice cream. We'll also pass the little post office. On our left is Eyam Hall, which is a big Jacobean manor house, which was built around the same time as the plague. As of the last census, the population of Eyam was just under 1,000 people. It's only about double what it was in 1665, before the plague struck. The village has an annual festival called Wakes Week, which includes well dressings and culminates in a village carnival. And every year on the last Sunday of August, a commemorative service is held in Coquelet Delph to remember the plague victims. So we're going to stop here at the plague cottages where the plague struck its first victims and where Eyam's tragic history begins. There's a row of pretty stone cottages with gardens, and each has a green plaque in front. The first one we'll come to is called Plague Cottage. The plaque on the front reads the following: Plague Cottage. Mary Hadfield, formerly Cooper, lived here with her 2 sons, Edward and Jonathan, her new husband, Alexander Hadfield, and an employed hand, George Vickers. George Vickers, the first plague victim, died on 7th of September 1665. The plaque then lists the 3 other members of Mary's family, Edward, Jonathan, and Alexander, who all died. Mary alone, it says, survived, but lost 13 relatives. Next door is the Rose Cottage. Here it says, 9 members of the Thorpe family lived here. They all died. You can find plaques all around the village that commemorate what happened here in 1665 and 1666. These cottages are now occupied. They have pretty gardens, cats in the window, family photos, curtains. It's eerie to think about living in a house with such a dark history. And if ghosts exist, you can bet these cottages have plenty. Cottage after cottage in the village have signs like these. There's the Hawksworth family home, where Jane was the sole survivor. She lost 25 relatives. Across the street is the home of the real Emmett Siddall, but we won't read the plaque there just yet. A little further down the street is the Church of St. Lawrence. Here you'll find an illuminated book that lists all the victims of the plague. It's estimated that 260 people died during the plague, and they're all listed here. There's some discussion about what the population of the village of Eyam was during that time. Some say it was about 350, some say it's more like 450, but all the people that did not survive the plague are listed here. There's also a beautiful stained glass window in the church. It depicts the story of the plague in Eyam. There's a plate that shows Emmett Siddall and Roland Torrey and them meeting across Coquelet Delph, which is a place that I told you about earlier. And the whole story is depicted there. I have a slideshow, which I'll put in the show notes, and if you happen to be listening on YouTube, you will see all these slides of all the places that I'm telling you about. So hopefully that will give you a little bit of an escape, maybe see a new place. If we go back to the top of the village now, we'll find the Eyam Museum. It's a really great little museum. It tells about life during the time of plague and tells stories from that time. There's a model with a plague doctor's outfit, which is quite terrifying, to be perfectly honest. You should see a picture of that in the slideshow. And tells other stories from the area. And in the gift shop, you will find copies of The Smallest Thing. Ironically, at the time of recording, the museum is closed due to coronavirus. If you'd like to take your own tour of Eyam, you'll find my slideshow with photos taken from my research trips. And if you'd like to learn more about the museum and the village and its history, there's a couple of websites that I'll list as well. You can go to eyam-museum.org.uk for information about the museum, and they have a great educational pack in there. It tells a lot more about what happened during that time, and you can also find a list of all the plague victims in order. Another good website is eamvillage.org.uk. And Eyam is spelled E-Y-A-M, by the way, even though it's pronounced Eyam. So check that out and you'll find out more information about the village. I hope you'll join me here next week as Em and her neighbours say goodbye to Dr. Spencer and fears grow in the village. I'll also be telling you about one of the research books that I read that I'm going to highly recommend. Finally, I've included a link to a video that shows the whole village of Eyam made from cake. It's well worth taking a look. So for now, be well, and I'll see you back here next week. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Smallest Thing. To make sure you don't miss next week's episode, you can subscribe now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and more. If you'd like to support the show, please leave a review and share this series with others you think might enjoy it. If you're on Instagram, tag me there at LisaManterfield_, or follow me on Facebook at author Lisa Manterfield and Twitter at Lisa Manterfield. My newsletter subscribers are always the first to know about my news, events, upcoming releases, giveaways, and more. Sign up for monthly delivery at lisamanterfield.com/subscribe and get your complimentary copy of Love, Loss and Letting Go, 3 of my short stories. Thanks to Justin Joseph for producing and editing this show, and to Ketsa.uk for the music. That's all for this episode. Thanks for listening.